Right. So let me just start right away because we got a new covert member, Carlos Sorgi from University of Sao Paulo, joining us today, and he's going to be part of our group now. But he's going to be presenting on some interesting work that he's been doing with COVID-19, looking at inflammatory proteins and lipid metabolites related with uh, clinical, outcome of COVID-19 and progression. So I'll introduce him briefly. And after 10 minutes, I'm going to give the regular updates as I usually do. Yeah, I have this slide up every time. I usually say, we're trying to plan for an in-person meeting. People
So often on my
Yeah.
screen, I don't know about others, I've got a totally expanded view that's partially cutting off everything. Others may not. That's what I have. May ask.
I don't have it on mine. Do other people have it on theirs?
Looks fine to me.
Okay.
Normal for me.
Thanks.
Okay,
Great,
so
thanks.
maybe do you have multiple screens, Steve? Maybe something weird is happening.
Yep, I'll see what's going on. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Feel free, people, to interrupt if there's something weird is happening with the presentation. I'm more than happy to see what's going on. Just some news. The papers. This paper here on the SEAT tool, the COVID exposure assessment tool, is actually coming out today. I think at 2 p.m. So it'll be out and about and out for the public to see. So excited to see that happen. But there's more papers in the works, of course. Just some really quick updates. I know Al's is starting up the monkeypox group. I know people like Helder, one of our new members, is interested in helping out too with that. And also Al had mentioned a couple of weeks ago about working on a case report paper for long COVID. He has some patients he sees that have some really interesting outcomes with their long COVID diagnosis that I haven't seen every report, and he hasn't either. But he's just looking for people to help him write, for example, a case report on a couple of patients he has, just to get the information out there. So if you want to help, email me, or if you have Al's contact Al. And then the long COVID group we're going to start up soon. I keep saying that every week, but we will. And then so let's dive into it, because I'm going to quickly go through all this so that I could give Carlos enough time to present for the rest of the meeting. But the usual updates, COVID news. People have been hearing that there's a new wave coming, and Europe's already starting in the UK and Europe down here, and the US people are predicting is not far behind. So we're already seeing as like in the Massachusetts area, which is this local news thing, we're already seeing the wastewater. I'll show you that data in a second. The wastewater is already showing indication, at least in Western Mass and most of Massachusetts, that the cases are going up. So I think it's starting in the East Coast from what I've been looking at. What was it, last week or 2 weeks ago? Biden declared pandemic is over, but of course, most scientists who are researching this will have something else to say that it's not. And maybe it's going to get worse, as this article says, and most scientists might agree with, because of the public messaging of that the pandemic's over, even though hospitalizations are rising in Europe, and things are probably going to happen like this in the next couple weeks or months in the U.S. So the bivalent booster has been released, but there's not that much customers for that. I actually got mine on Wednesday, so I got my bivalent booster. So I'm predicted maybe that's the reason I got it, knowing these waves are coming, at least have some extra protection. And this interesting paper came out this past yesterday. Yeah, about these guys from Scripps, from Stuart Lipton's lab, talking about a potential new drug that actually uses, and I highlighted the section from this article talking about it, actually uses would turn the virus against itself based on the drug they're developing. I'm not going to go into the details just for the sake of time, but at least the links here. As usual, I'll share all the slides with people so you can read the paper targeting this protein in ACE2. This other paper came out in Cell. I think it was earlier this week, talking about how getting the booster response, and if you're infected or not, what's the best outcome for B cells and antibody remembrance, or for your outcomes to actually get the best response for your immune system. And what was interesting, just a really general overview of the paper, was that if you're uninfected and boosted within the 60 days, you get a lot of response. If you're boosted, then get infected, you got a similar response, as this graphical abstract shows. But then if you're actually infected and then get boosted, it doesn't seem like it to have as much of a response. So that was interesting. So you could take a read at this paper and look at the B cell response based on the boosters and the timing of it, in case people were wondering if they have been infected or not, when they should get the next booster. It's an interesting paper. They looked at patients. They got blood from, I forget how many patients, but a few patients, like 60, I think. Oh, here it is, somewhere in here, but 60 some patients. Here's another paper. Here's another little article talking about if people attend the Duncan McCannell's CDC Spheres call this past week. People involved in this article here actually gave a talk. Mark Johnson did. In talking about the sewage, but the whole point of this article and what they're doing here, Dave O'Connor, who's in University of Wisconsin, and Mark Johnson, I forget where he is. Oh, University of Missouri. They've been looking at these cryptic, they call it the cryptic lineages of that come from wastewater, and they sometimes they're thinking it could be dubbed pi or maybe something else. But anyway, the point is that they've been able to track these potentially cryptic lineages, as they call, that are of major concern if they do get released in the public. And they've been seeing this in the wastewater for a long time. And then what's neat about it is through the wastewater, they've been actually able to trace to a certain buildings where maybe that one person, for example, they've been thinking that there could be a person have a chronic infection in this building over months. So they're trying to find out where these are and track it down. And then maybe this could be a potential way of monitoring, new variants of concern or cryptic ones that would be very concerned if it does break out. And this site here actually has his slides. He presented spheres in detail. Again, I'm going to go through this really quick because I'm going to give Carlos time to present. And then new variants to watch kind of comes from this and goes into here. But there's this one variant you might be hearing about called BF.7. It's actually the same as BA.275.2. But the media, for some reason, sometimes you see articles talking about this variant BF.7 is separate from this BA.2.75.2, but they're the same thing. So if you see articles that are talking about, but the point is, BA.2.75 was that original variant that was coming from India that didn't really take off. It was fairly low, and it was fairly low in the U.S. And right now, BF.7, I should say, is fairly low. I'll show you in the U.S. it isn't. Not that existent in most other countries. But the concern is, this paper came out a few weeks ago, and what they're talking about here is that due to what they're seeing is this BF.7 can be very concerning because of its way of escaping, neutralizing antibodies and evading basically the immune response. So if it does break out, that would be concerning. But right now, they're just watching it. So something that you might see pop up in the news over and over. This is just kind of the distribution overall around the world of the variants. I mean, still BA.5 seems to be the top one. BA.4.6 is creeping up, as we know. This I'll just go over just in case people are interested in mutation, including the slides that I'll share with everyone. Some recent long COVID news, which is interesting. This paper came out, I think, a couple of weeks ago, talking about, I mean, it's not exactly long COVID, but it has implications to it. Talking about, they looked at transcriptomic cardiac tissues from patients. Granted, this was N equals, I think, 6 or 7, so not a very big study. But what was interesting is when they ran the RNA-seq data, they're saying, yeah, definitely there's long-term cardiovascular effect, N equals 6. And something of interest to people who are involved with our mitochondrial paper that we just resubmitted back to Science Translational Medicine, that everyone involved, obviously we know that mitochondrial function based on our analysis is heavily suppressed in the heart. And actually with their N equals 6, they briefly mention in a paragraph at the very end of the paper that they see that happen too, but that's not the focus of the paper. They're really focusing on interferon signals and things like that. So, and looking at DNA damage as they talk about here, like gamma H2X, things like that. But they do actually acknowledge there's a cluster of genes, and you can see this is a heat map, some of the genes that we are familiar with in our work we've been doing together. So that's, I guess, a good confirmation of what we're seeing. And this is I forget which variant they're looking at here, but you can read the paper. A paper that came out from the group Survivor Corps, people know who Diana is. This paper came out recently talking about nice categorization of long COVID, long haul patients and the symptoms as a function of day and when it emerges. And this was with about 5,000, 6,000 patients. Diane did her survey to her survivor core, and this is what they got. It's a really interesting paper. People interested, you can see that, like this figure here shows that, with onset of day, some of these factors that symptoms that come as day. For example, blurry vision seems to happen more often at 25 days after acute infection. So this is an interesting paper. People might be interested in reading. And then again, really quickly going through stuff just for sake to get Carlos enough time to talk. Some other long COVID news is talking about, you might have seen these articles talking about potentially one significant role, in long COVID, or one thing that could contribute to long COVID is this autoimmune response, and people think it could be autoimmune type disease, or one thing could be an autoimmune type disease. This paper was talking about about people who had more severe respiratory issues. About 41% of them had detectable autoantibodies in their blood after a year. And they said 20 to 30% of them had about inflammation markers that were associated with that. So it's an interesting paper there. This was actually a nice little summary, and some people who know Wes, who collaborates with us at Vanderbilt, he talks about the four current hypotheses that are circulating around the community for long COVID, and talking about that long COVID should be categorized maybe multiple diseases within long COVID, and then of course it could just not be these four; it could be a lot more. But they're focusing on this, so people are interested read that. This is the long COVID dashboard. But okay, so really quickly again, just going through this so give Carlos time. The variant distribution around the U.S. You can see BA.5 again dominant still, but BA4.6 is coming up. The wastewater is interesting because the overall trend in the U.S. is coming down, but if you look at regional aspects, you can see the Northeast is actually going up. Well, there seems to be a little plateau here. Maybe the rest of the states or regions will follow shortly. This is Massachusetts, where I said the wastewater is showing that the uptrend's happening. CDC site kind of shows the same thing, and then this other site that I like to show shows around the world you could go, and looking at California, they seem to be going on a lower trend. At least Palo Alto, Bay Area. I'm going to skip this. You can look at this in the slides, but then go to this with the CDC COVID tracker. You can see that BA4.6, that one variant of concern, is still rising, but then this BF.7, which is the same thing as 2.75.2, this little, olivish color, you can see how it's starting to slowly gain, in the U.S. You can see the regions where it's coming. Still low, like 2 to 3%, but, as I said, this one does take over. People are predicting it has a lot greater from what they're saying, neutralizing antibody evasion and immune and the vaccine evasion. So I'm going to end here, but just show the global uptake.
If I, Afshin, this is Kevin Clark. Can I interrupt for a quick second?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, have you heard any news about maybe changes in infection distribution related to mass migration out of Florida due to hurricane?
No, yeah, that'd be interesting to see. I think it's too early to tell, right? But
okay. Oh.
Yeah. I guess we have to keep our eye on that for the next week, right, and see what happens. Yeah.
Yep.
That would be interesting data if anyone actually looks at it. But there could be something. Yeah, you're right. Of concern. But globally, you can see the hospitalizations in some countries, like France and UK. I'm just going to quickly here. Like you see, France is starting to go back up. Hospitalizations, cases are going up there. Most of other Europe is starting to trend that way. US is still overall going down, but depending on the regions it's up. So I'm going to stop here because I want to give Carlos time. And again, I use my usual, cases and distribution, just so when I send the slides, people can go through it in their leisure. And hopefully not many questions here because I'm going to give Carlos time.
Can you bullet a real quick question for me? Yes, no,
sure.
whatever. The wastewater data you talked about, all the evidence, things are coming up, the heading towards a surge. But what's the strain? Is it 4.6? They must have a pretty good idea what this is going to be by now, or not?
Yeah, I mean, right now, this is the distribution of the percentage. Like the Northeast, it says 2.7 of the BA.2, because that's pretty much gone. So BA4 is about 8%. Still dominance 88.6, but as the
But
CDC tracker,
4.6?
4.6 is like 8% in the Northeast. Where was that? Sorry, go back up. Yeah, it's right here. So Northeast is about 4 is 8, but the category is in 4.6 within 4. So that's when they say 4 is 4.6 is included in that, and BA.5 is that. So
So we
if you
don't
look,
know. We don't know what's driving this.
yeah, but if you look at the CDC tracker here, you can see that BA 4.6 in the Northeast is gaining. That blue wedge, it's gaining. So a similar trend as BA.5 might be occurring. As we saw, BA.5 started the same thing as BA.4.6 when it
That's
started.
what it looked like. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess we have to wait. Okay, so I guess I'll stop sharing.